Hi, welcome back to Field Archaeology 101. As you can see, the river is blasting behind us and the mosquitoes are flying everywhere. But in reality, it's going to be necessary to get inside every once in a while and take a deeper look into some of the treasures that we're uncovering on the site. So I'm going to try to go two directions today. We're at a local lab where we can talk and have some quiet. And I want to talk to you a little bit about a tool that has popped up on the site. And then if there's time, maybe go back to some of the fire pits and look in depth. So let's start with this tool right here. This is called a Celt, a C-E-L-T, a Celt. In the county where I live, near Mansfield, Ohio, they're relatively common. And I grabbed a few on my way here this morning so that you could get an idea of the diversity of Celts. This is a handful of over 100 Celts that I found across the years in Richland County. Two reasons for that. Either they were extremely forgetful when they went through this area, or perhaps this is a fairly common tool, or perhaps they may have been caching these and leaving them behind. There are so many options. So what I want to remind you is that when you're dealing with our archaeological past, it's really tough to say this is this, that is that, and this is for certain, because new information is constantly coming up. The Celt, for example, it has been guessed, a hatchet, an axe without a groove, but the reality of this is we're leaning toward possibly a tool that they could put on the end of a stick and slide it up underneath the bark of a tree and pop the bark off, get long extensions of bark, and literally lay under them at night to get out of the elements, the dew, the rain, whatever it is. A lot of options. But the reason I'm telling you all this is you hear words that I use that are really important. Whether I'm on my dig site or in a field walking or in my lab looking at things, I'm constantly thinking about patterns. What do I see? What is related to this? What is related to that? When you look at these Celts, basically you're seeing sort of a gray-green color. Why is that important? Because when you're walking your field, if you see a gray-green color, you dig it out of the ground. And I can tell you, out of over 100 Celts, less than a handful were actually laying fully exposed. Most of them were buried. And I saw a color, I saw a texture, or I saw a geometric shape. And for that reason, I dug them out of the ground. Again, I'm balancing two things here. I want you to not only be successful in your field walking, but I want you to grow in your knowledge and your confidence about these people and their things and what they were doing. But I also want to integrate my dig site and keep you part of the adventure with me. So looking at these Celts and then slipping back to my dig site, these four Celts were buried together. And anytime, and some archaeologists say if you have two or more of something, you have a cache. Some of us would say 3 or 4 or more, you have a cache. Either way, these four Celts were buried together about 14 inches beneath the surface, right on the edge of the terrace that drops down into the major river below me. And now when I look at these, what is interesting to me is each one of them has a bit. Except some of these bits are not only flat, but they've been polished or grinded to be flat. Now that's unusual. And then here's one that's been broken from usage and never resharpened here, dulled. Okay, so the question is, what is going on here? Let me pick up this Celt. This is one I found very recently in Coshocton County, Ohio. And if you look at it straight on, you notice that the bit is not the way it ought to be. It's kind of lopsided. And the reason for that lopsided bit, if you look at the one side, it's very smooth. If I flip him over, suddenly you're beginning to see repair, a different polish in this area. This bit was broken, and for them to repair it, they lost some of the blade. Now, why is this significant? Well, when these people traveled, they carried their tools with them. And if you have a sharp blade and they're in a toolbox and they bang together, you can lose part of your blade. And then you've got to resharpen it. So you can either carry sharp blades and take the risk of them breaking, or you can do this. Kind of dull the edge, throw them in your toolbox, and you don't have to worry about them breaking. It doesn't matter. When you get to your destination, you pick it up real quick, you pick up an abrasive rock, and you start to work. Get that edge back real quickly. I think this was done for a more successful transport of the piece without getting it broken. Now you're going to hear from me, you're going to hear from a lot of these other archaeological sites opinions, and you're going to hear a lot of academics throwing out opinions. I would always say be a little bit cautious and very mindful when someone says, well, we know this for a fact, because people forever said these were skinning tools, tools that they used to flush animals with. That is just not realistic. For those of you who have ever hunted or trapped or skinned your animals, you know that this is just simply not going to work. But what does work is sliding this underneath the bark and pushing it up, getting these sections of bark off. You've got something to sleep under. Now, a little bit of supportive evidence to this. One of my friends that lives up in Lakewood, in Cleveland, Ohio, loves to read about the Jesuit priests and their movement across the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes, Canada, down the Mississippi. In one of his readings, they talked about a tool, and they described it like this, that they put in the end of a pole. They went underneath trees and they removed large sections of bark. Now that's good supportive evidence. But even now, we still can't say this is exactly what they used it for. They were opportunists. If they had 5 needs and one tool could take care of all 5 needs, it did it. And you can't say it was designed exactly for this or exactly for that. It had various needs and it took care of it. So what is unique about these Celts, at least for Ohio, and I'd love to hear back from the rest of you, is that we do find Celts all over the place, but rarely next to, and I mean rarely, do we ever find a cache of them together. And these were together. They were right by this multiple village site that we're working on. And since these were discovered, I think we probably have only found 5 or 6 more Celts, but they were not in a group. They were lone finds in the various profiles in the walls of our dig. But this is unique. And even though you think you're out in the field and something isn't unique or whatever, it could be. So don't be quick to get rid of something. Don't be quick to write it off. Connect with some people that know a little bit more about it with you. Get some opinions. And all this is leading this direction to these magazines. And I want to encourage everybody to grow in your love of your hobby, in pursuit of your treasures, but learn. And in most states, or in most areas of the United States, there's an archaeological journal that you can acquire for very little. 4 of these in Ohio in 1 year for around $30. And there's 40, 50 pages in these things. And then there's one for the Central States Archaeological Journal. And this covers the Missouri, Arkansas, down south, all over. And so another journal. These you can Google and look more upon, get them. And I encourage you to investigate these, because these are going to put feet underneath your field walking, underneath your work on a site that you might be excavating. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes your life. Thanks for joining us today.